The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
I suppose, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, will depend on how you feel today. For some of us, it was kind of a sleepless night, and we'll leave it at that. This is a sports show, and we try to stick to sports around here, but still 4 months to go until the election. So, like we say in the sports world, we'll see how it all plays out. We will get to what happened in the NBA draft yesterday. Bronny James does wind up with the Lakers, and it's kind of head-scratching given that the Celtics had the pick before and didn't take them to, try and squeeze something out of the Lakers. But there's a reason for that, apparently, and it's, to me, a little bit of a troubling reason. Austin Ekeler is everywhere. I mean, Austin Ekeler has been with the Commanders since, March, when free agency started? There isn't a show he won't go on, and he's very good. He's going to have a career in media whenever he finishes playing, but he was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday. We'll play some of what he said in the 10 o'clock hour and roll through the morning on sports and, as best we can, stick to sports. All right, so yesterday they wrapped up the draft. They did it a different way this year, and maybe it makes sense because what they found with the second round of the draft, when they limited it to 2 minutes for pick, general managers were complaining that it was too quick. If they wanted to make a deal, they couldn't do it. It was difficult to make decisions, and nobody probably was watching after the first round anyway on TV. So instead of going to a second night on TV, and I think this was a good idea, what ESPN did was they ran the second round starting at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So they wrapped up, 6-ish, which I think makes a lot more sense for them, and I would think they're going to stick with this the rest of the way. 4 minutes between picks for second rounders, who are never going to play in the NBA, many of them. Yeah, it does seem to be, excessive. But we find out a little bit about the inner workings of the NBA as this rolls through. And so here's Bronny James on the board, as many expected. This talk of him going number 17 overall to the Lakers was never really going to make sense. He started a half a dozen games in college. He clearly needs a lot more seasoning if he's going to be a player, and who knows if he's going to be a player. He's 6'1", he's not 6'8", like his dad, and he's only 19 years old. Remember, he had that terrible incident a year ago. It's really less than a year ago. It was July of 2023 when he literally died on the court. And fortunately, they had the defibrillator to bring him back to life. He had some surgery and played about half the season for USC. Averaged less than 5 points a game. This is not your usual pick, not even in the second round. But the extenuating circumstances of this led them to wind up with the 55th pick, the Lakers, and they took him, and they make it happen with his dad, Bronny and Bron. And there's some cool pictures, by the way, that have been sent out that I really like. One of them with LeBron in his Cleveland jersey holding up his young son, his toddler son. And now they're teammates, and that is just absolutely incredible. Yes, LeBron came into the league when he was not quite 18 years old, but it's really amazing that somebody could play basketball this long, and not only that, but be at this level. He's not the oldest player in the history of the NBA. Kareem was like 42. I think there have been a few others who have been there in their 40s and have played, and have played okay, but he's still one of the stars of the league. So he has a lot of sway here. And on top of the fact that in his new contract, he's going to make $162 million, it's going to be for 3 years. And the intriguing part of this is he's got another son named Bryce. Bryce becomes eligible for the NBA in 2026. So if it kind of works out with Bronny for 2 years, They bring in the other son for LeBron's last year when he would be, 42, going on 43? Maybe. This guy spends, he says, $2 million a year on keeping his body in shape, and he has said for years that he wants to play with his son, and now he's made it happen. But, back to what happened yesterday as the draft was unfolding. When they got to, pick 45 or so, You heard Bob Myers, who is actually one of the consultants for the Commanders. He was part of their search for a new general manager and a new coach. He's got, connections to Josh Harris, having been in the NBA for a long time. He was the general manager of the Golden State Warriors. And it came up, well, what if, some team tries to take Bronny first? And LeBron had opted out of his contract, so theoretically, if another team ahead took Bronny, LeBron could join that team and play with Bronny there. But Myers said, no, that's not going to happen, because here's the plan that was hatched by Clutch Sports and Rich Paul, who's LeBron's agent and will be Bronny's agent. He said, Rich Paul is calling teams and saying, don't take Bronny James. If you take him, he's going to go to Australia. Well, I guess there must be other parts of this, because if I were the Celtics, who had one pick ahead of the Lakers, they were picking 54, and the Lakers picking 55, I'd have taken him and said, yeah, go ahead, go to Australia, see what happens, Or if you're the Lakers, give us something that's high in value. Give us a player that we could use and do that. So they ceded to the demands, apparently, of Rich Paul, and sure enough, Bronny went 55. Also, ESPN was totally on board with all of this, Michigas. This was Adrian Wojnarowski as we were getting closer to the Bronny pick, and he decided that he was going to have a great defense for LeBron and Bronny, and how nobody should criticize what's going on here, as LeBron is not only seemingly running the Lakers, he's running the league. Here was Woj yesterday.
I don't want to hear these charges, people talking about nepotism.
No,
the NBA is full of nepotism. Full of it. The ownership level, front offices, coaching. Yep. I don't want to hear it all of a sudden because of Bronny James's father plays for the Lakers. Right. It is rampant in this league.
But it doesn't excuse it. Just because there is nepotism, which, look, Austin Rivers, people forget about this. Austin Rivers played for Doc Rivers, I think, with the Clippers. Nobody made a big deal about that because that was the coach and that was the player. This is the star player, or at least, he's the star player still, LeBron, and he's got the kid. This is uncharted waters, as we like to say. And do we know what the fallout is going to be? Who knows? But they've got their hand-picked coach. I mean, you keep hearing Brian Windhorst say, LeBron doesn't pick the coach. But J.J. Redick certainly got the LeBron seal of approval, and it goes back to when they did a podcast together. And he would not be the coach of the Lakers if LeBron didn't want him to be. So there's J.J. Redick. So now he's facing something that is really unique. And I've told this story before, but when Al McGuire coached at Marquette in the early 1970s, his son was the point guard, Allie McGuire. And there was another player on the team by the name of George Frazier. And George Frazier went to coach Al McGuire, and he said, I should be starting ahead of Allie. I'm as good as he is. And McGuire said, George, if you're going to play ahead of my son, you got to be better than my son. A tie goes to him. It's the blood that means something here. Frazier wound up playing a lot, but Allie was the starter. That's coach and player. And I've always said it can go either way. You could either be the best player on the team and start for the coach, who's your dad, or you can be the worst player and be on the team and not play. And it seems to go both ways. A lot of times, even Danny Hurley had his son on the team as a walk-on, so he only got minutes in garbage time, and that kind of worked out for both of them. The son maybe could have played at a Division II level, Division III, but he wanted to play for his dad, so he understood that he got limited playing time. But when you have a starting situation like this, and so that leads to the question, because this is again is going to be unique. You got to figure that J.J. Redick is going to want to keep LeBron happy. And are the minutes that go to Bronny determined by J.J., or are they determined by LeBron? And either way, J.J.'s in a bad spot, because if he's playing Bronny and Bronny is really struggling, other players on the team, not just the ones who are starting, but the others who aren't playing, this is not going to go over well. This is going to be an issue on the team. And, as we've seen LeBron churn through coach after coach after coach, not just in Los Angeles, but other places, let's keep an eye on this as the season unfolds. You can't have a player go to JJ and say, hey, I'm as good as Bronny. He goes, well, you got to be better than Bronny, because look over there. There's the coach, and you may even have some players who are clearly better than Bronny, but aren't playing because it's important to keep LeBron happy. So this could be a very, very ticklish situation. But the fact that LeBron and his agent were pretty much controlling the league in this draft to steer Bronny to the Lakers tells you more of the influence of LeBron. It goes beyond his team and now goes to apparently the entire league. That he and his agent can intimidate the league to make sure that Bronny doesn't get drafted. Otherwise, they're going to haul off to Australia and play. I'd have called the bluff if I were the Celtics. I would have said the hell with it. And it would have been great for juicing up the rivalry. I think that would have been terrific if the Lakers would have taken Bronny and said, oh, you want him? What are you going to give us? What are you going to give us? But there we are. There's another big story that's happening now that's probably not on your radar. It's a little bit complicated legalese, but this could be huge for the NFL. It's got to be an awful lot of money to really hurt the league, and this is an awful lot of money. The NFL was taken to court by subscribers who said that they had inflated the price of the Sunday ticket on DirecTV from 2011 to 2022, and that the league broke antitrust laws by selling the package at an inflated price. They also say the league restricted competition by offering the Sunday ticket only on the satellite. Remember, you couldn't get this through cable. This was until it's now on YouTube, so it's available through cable, I guess, and satellite. But when it was on the DirecTV from 2011 to 2022, this was what they would call a monopoly. And the attorney for the league in this, and they got their butts kicked. I mean, there's going to be an appeal, obviously. But the attorney was Beth Wilkinson. You remember the name Beth Wilkinson? Yeah, Beth Wilkinson started out when Dan Snyder was trying to defend himself and hired her for a quote-unquote impartial investigation of his team. And when the Washington Post put out another round of stories about the toxic culture of the organization, the league said, whoa, we're going to take it from here. We're going to pay Beth Wilkinson. And Beth Wilkinson is going to conduct the investigation, which she completed, and the league conveniently buried. We didn't get it, right? Never came out. It's off, some island somewhere. And what they did was that they had everybody involved in the case testify verbally. So there's no paper trail for that. Fortunately, we were able to flush Snyder out of the league a few years later, but that was Beth Wilkinson. Well, Wilkinson represented the NFL, and according to what Don Van Natta has, and Van Natta's a great investigative reporter, he said this was a layup for the NFL, and they went to a woman who had no antitrust experience as a lawyer. So here's where they stand now. This is Mike Florio, who's also an attorney, ProFootballTalk.com, explaining where this lawsuit sits right now, with the league right now on the hook, not just for the $4.8 billion, but for the treble damages. Listen to this.
The jury ordered the NFL to pay $96 million in damages to the commercial establishments that were in this massive class action of 2.4 million plaintiffs, and $4 billion to the residential class, the folks like you and me who have been paying for Sunday ticket for years at a rate higher than under the antitrust laws, as interpreted, applied, and enforced by this jury, it should have been. So that's $4 billion. 4.096 billion is the verdict. And under the antitrust laws, you know what happens? Gets tripled. So that's about 12.3 billion that the NFL is going to have to pay, assuming this verdict is upheld. So let that sink in. 12.3 billion. More than most teams would sell for right now. The Cowboys would probably sell for more than that if they were for sale. But the NFL basically has to buy at a very high rate a 33rd franchise to pay off this verdict if the NFL ultimately has to do it. There's no guarantee the NFL will have to do it. Remember, the judge has in his back pocket the NFL's motion for judgment as a matter of law. Judge hadn't ruled on it yet. Judge could take this all away. In one fell swoop, it could be gone. The judge could say, there's not sufficient evidence to support a jury verdict on liability. The plaintiffs get nothing. Now, I wrote about this earlier today. How do you get to the point where a jury finds against the NFL and the judge finds that no reasonable jury could find for the NFL? Does that mean the jury isn't reasonable? No, it just means the jury was influenced by things other than it should have been. The jury thought the NFL did something wrong, but there wasn't enough evidence when you look at the technical legal requirements, the way that you basically have to build your case. It's like getting one of those Lego sets. There's an ornate way to put the case together, to put the model together. And if the plaintiffs didn't get the right evidence in to prove the case, then there isn't enough evidence that would support a reasonable jury verdict that the plaintiffs should win. That could happen. Whatever happens next, this is destined to be appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals because we have a verdict, the jury has spoken. So the first question is, does the law circumvent what the jury did? The judge is going to take that up. Then once the judge rules on the NFL's motion for judgment as a matter of law, it goes to the Ninth Circuit. Everybody who loses in the federal district court system has the automatic right to appeal to the next level up. There are 11, 12, 13 circuits, federal circuits in the country. California's in the 9th. After that, there's no automatic right to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. You have to convince the U.S. Supreme Court to take the case. There's about 100 to 150 cases taken every year of more than 7,000 petitions that are submitted. So there's no guarantee that if the NFL loses in the Ninth Circuit, the NFL is going to get into the Supreme Court. We've joked in the past about the Super Bowl ring that Jerry Jones once gave to Clarence Thomas. That might be a vote. 4 of the 9 justices have to vote to take up the case. And then once the case is in the Supreme Court, 5 of the 9 have to vote in favor of the prevailing side. So the first challenge will be Ninth Circuit. What does the Ninth Circuit do? And then after that, especially if the NFL loses, I guarantee you, and with this much money at issue, whoever loses at the Ninth Circuit is going to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. There's too much money now. It's one thing for the plaintiff to, if it's $1 million verdict, how far do you want to push this? How much more money do you want to spend? When you got $12 billion in hand, you take it all the way to the highest court in the land to try to make that $12 billion. And who knows, maybe it'll settle at this point. And the one thing that we all need to hope for as consumers and fans of the NFL, that this is the wake-up call to the NFL that 30 years of doing it this way is enough. It's over. The game is ended. It's time to start making Sunday Ticket available at a cheaper price for the full package and options including single team, single weekend, single game. Whatever the consumer wants. Give the consumer real choice, not at a markup. Real choice, real options to watch any games they want, either as part of their cable package, like the NFL considered back in 2017, or you buy it but you don't have to spend $389 for the full season or $449 or more to watch the full year of Sunday Ticket or have access to the full year of Sunday Ticket because all you want to see is Buccaneers games if you live in Topeka, Kansas.
Yeah, isn't that usually the case that you'll find, say, somebody who lives here who's from, let's say, New Orleans and wants to watch all the Saints games, doesn't care about buying all the other games that are available on the Sunday Ticket, but you have to buy the whole thing, and it $450 a season, that's a lot of money. Now, if the NFL does wind up paying, and I am pretty much sure, I'm not a lawyer, but it just seems to me they're going to win on an appeal in the Supreme Court because this does seem like an awful lot of money, even for the NFL. But if they wind up paying the damages, it could cost each team close to $500 million. I know the Commanders sold for over $6 billion, and if you put the Cowboys up, they'd go for more than $10 billion. But $500 million is a quarter of what the Carolina Panthers went for like 5 or 6 years ago. So they're going to fight this, and there's going to be a lot of billable hours there. And I would imagine that Beth Wilkinson is going to be shoved aside for lawyers who have a lot more experience in antitrust cases. Now, Judge Philip Gutierrez is scheduled to hear post-trial motions July 31st, including the NFL's request to have him rule in favor of the league because the judge determined the plaintiffs did not prove their case. So that's step number one. Then it goes to the Ninth Circuit, and as Florio said, it could wind up in the Supreme Court, which, I'm sure the NFL will take it all that way if they continue to lose. Here's a funny little part of all of this. DirecTV had the Sunday ticket from 1994 through 2022. They're only suing for the part from 2011 to 2022, but it goes back to 1994, and the league signed a 7-year deal with Google in 2023, so it's on Google now. But this lawsuit, which has now been picked up and has advanced to this stage now, the lawsuit was originally filed in 2015 by ready for this? The Mucky Duck Sports Bar in San Francisco, but was dismissed in 2017. 2 years later, the Ninth Circuit, which has jurisdiction over California and 8 other states, reinstated the case, and they ruled last year that they could proceed with a class action suit, which they did, which has gotten us to this point where the league could be on the hook for over $14 billion. That's real money, even for the NFL. Even for the NFL, that's real money. So, I am really shocked that it got to this point. And I got to look at some hubris here with Beth Wilkinson in that, she was someone we were talking about for months and months and months here, in that she had been hired by Dan Snyder for a quote-unquote independent investigation of his team until things got too hot and the league took over. And then the league took her investigation and buried it. It never got out. It took, finally, the Mary Jo White investigation, as Snyder was popped for $60 million on his way out the door, but that was tipping money as he walked away with $6 billion. It is what it is. Coming up, speaking of local, Scott Van Pelt doing his show in D.C., talked to Alex Sarr the other night after he was drafted number 2 overall to the Wizards. If you missed it, we'll play that conversation next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So when did the WNBA start? Was it 97, 98? It's been around 26, 27 years, whatever it is. I just did something that I have never done since that league started, and that was to check the TV listings to find out about a particular WNBA game, and that is the Caitlin Clark effect. There is no question about it. She played in a great spot last weekend. They had the 4 o'clock Sunday game at Chicago, the Indiana Fever and Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark. That's becoming the big rivalry in the league, and they're coming in at the same time. They've got the Magic and Bird effect on that league, more so with Caitlin Clark, though, I must say, despite what Angel Reese says about how people are watching her and not necessarily watching Caitlin Clark. I'll give you the TV numbers in just a second, but they're in another good spot Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock at Phoenix, so it's a little earlier than last week, but, unless you're really into, NASCAR, or maybe you're watching the Rocket Mortgage Classic Golf on CBS, you're probably going to tune over to this because there's big buildup to this. You got Diana Taurasi, who has said things about Caitlin Clark before she got in the league, like, oh, yeah, well, wait till she gets a load of, these veterans who've been playing a long time, and she'll kind of get her comeuppance. And that could lead us to this, that Caitlin Clark may be a little bit shy about taking shots because of the criticism that she's gotten. She was a shooter in college. Last year, as a senior at Iowa, she averaged almost 23 shots a game. Last night, Indiana lost at Seattle 89-77, and her coach, what's her name, Christy Side, said Caitlin needs to shoot a minimum of 15 shots a game. She's got to get shots. We got to do a better job of setting her up, setting some good screens for her to get open. She finished with 15 points. She only put up 9 shots, 4 of 9 from the field, 3 of 7 from behind the arc, 4 of 5 from the free throw line, had 7 assists and 6 rebounds. Not a bad game, but not a dominant game, which is, what you would have expected. And you would never expect to hear a coach of Caitlin Clark say, oh, yeah, she's got to shoot the ball more. During her 4-year career at Iowa, she averaged over 20 shots a game. Last year, 23 shots a game. She currently leads all rookies in shot attempts, but 22nd in the league overall. So she's, pretty far behind for someone who is known to be a shooter. And if you look at the television numbers, whatever you hear from Angel Reese and whatever criticism you're going to get from Diana Taurasi, who's probably going to be primed to show her up on Sunday afternoon, here are the numbers. And by the way, they drew over 2 million people for that Chicago game on Sunday, which was the highest-rated WNBA game since 2001. In games that Caitlin Clark plays, the TV numbers average 1.1 million. The games that she misses, 428,000. Less than half the audience. And last year's average for the whole year was 301,000. So she triples that every time she plays. And even without her, and I think, rising tide lifts all boats, I think she helps the rest of the league to get to 428,000, even in games she doesn't play in. So this will be, I believe, a highly rated game. It could be another 2 million people watching that, which is unbelievable numbers for the WNBA. And that is going to be something that I'll make appointment viewing, which again, for the WNBA all those years, I don't think I've ever done that before. I promised you the conversation that Alex Sarr had with Scott Van Pelt the other night after the Wizards took him with the number 2 pick. The reason I play this is I think this is really cool that Scott does his show. He's a local guy, went to Sherwood, loves Maryland, the whole thing, and does his show from D.C., same studio that Tony and Mike use to do PTI. And so I found this very, very local and heartwarming to listen to SVP talking to Alex Sarr hours after he was drafted.
Our studio is about a mile away from your new home, and I'm going to get to the Wizards in a minute, but I want to start with the emotion of the night. Folks that have watched this show know that I'm not afraid to cry. Hell, I cried on this show last night. When you were talking to Monica McNutt, it was clear the emotion hit you. And when it did, what was the reality that landed with you that moved you to tears? I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, I just thought back to all the moments I shared with my brother and got a little emotional for sure, because it's such a big achievement and, I'm really happy right now.
That's fantastic. You mentioned your brother. He's a little older and has been on a similar path. How much does it help to have a family member who can tell you so many things to anticipate that you're now going through?
It helps a lot, having a brother that already plays in the NBA, he kind of acts like I'm an NBA player, because he just tells me so much and, I'm learning so much through him.
In terms of what you feel like you can bring now and what you feel like you can bring in time, it's a maturing process in the NBA, right? Who you will be in a few years maybe isn't who you are now. What's your sense, Alex, of the kind of progression you're hoping to make in time here in Washington?
I'm trying to improve all around. I'm trying to improve in my game and everything I do. I don't think there's a single thing that I'm, perfect at. I think I can get better at a lot of different things. So. But I know that from day one I can bring a lot of versatility and a lot of defensive versatility too.
Right. What do you know about Washington right now? Because we can hook you up. I got you hardwired. You need a realtor, we got you. We can take care of you here because, as I say, we're a mile away from where you're going to be playing. But what's your first thought about playing in the nation's capital?
I don't know much about D.C., but I know a lot about the Wizards, and I know they play really fast. It's a young team, and I can't wait to join them.
Well, the nation's capital awaits, Alex. I know you've been talking basically nonstop since your name was called, and I'm certain that you'd like to get with your family and your folks and enjoy this evening. So go do that. Congratulations and all the best here in Washington, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, it feels good, right? National show, local ties. It was nice. The brother, by the way, I pronounced it Oliver. I guess I should know better. He's from France. It's Olivier. And he's been with the Oklahoma City Thunder for 3 years. He's only played in 46 games. He's got that two-way contract. He's a 4-year player, Wake Forest, undrafted, signed by the Thunder when Will Dawkins was the GM there. And, what you've heard a lot of in the last few days is, Alex Sarr, he wanted to play in Washington because he wanted to be in Washington. In listening to the interviews, it doesn't sound, to me anyway, like he's necessarily interested in the city as much as he is interested in playing for this team. And I think it's because of what his brother has told him about his experience in going to Oklahoma City with Will Dawkins, who's the GM here now. and what they're trying to build and the style that they play. And so he didn't work out for Atlanta. And many thought, well, Washington's an international city, and we got all these embassies here and museums. And yeah, I mean, that's nice, and it's great to live here and have all that. But, it doesn't sound like necessarily that's why he refused to work out for Atlanta, that he was more interested in the style of play that they have in Washington. So I found that to be an interesting element of this. I haven't seen a news conference schedule. I imagine they're going to have media availability today. I thought they would have it yesterday, but maybe because of the second round of the draft. So we'll have, Alex Sarr probably in town, Bub Carrington, who was the 14th pick of the draft. He's from Baltimore, another guy that's happy to be here. And also maybe they'll bring in Keyshawn George, the shooter from Miami, who they took 24 in the first round. But I'm kind of surprised because usually they have a follow-up day news conference. They'll probably have a big one today and bring all three of those players in so they can do the one-on-ones with the TV and take lots of pictures. And they'll probably have Winger and Dawkins there and the whole Megillah. So as we're moving on from the winter sports too. Hockey's holding its draft tonight. So once that's done, we can actually start summer. Hockey and basketball, which started in October, finally wrap up as we tickle July. Pretty amazing. All right, coming up in the next hour, Austin Ekeler, who makes the rounds, who talks to everybody, talking to Rich Eisen about what else, Jayden Daniels, and how good the Commanders will be this year. And Matt Hassleback with some interesting thoughts. He now coaches quarterbacks and what to look for as they try to develop Daniels. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. Heading towards the weekend before the weekend. And if you haven't checked the calendar, July 4th is next Thursday. Really going to come back to work on Friday? So this is like a weekend before a 3-day work week for many people. We're rolling into summer, and we're about to put the cap on the last of the winter stuff as the hockey draft is tonight. Capitals are picking 17th. We'll see how much they are active in this draft. They have rounds 2 through 7 tomorrow, so there's going to be a lot of picks. Not like the NBA where you only have 2 rounds. But, these are names that you're not going to know. Well, you could say that about the NBA, too. The way the draft is morphed. That'll change next year, maybe, with Cooper Flagg getting a lot of attention at Duke, and he's expected to be number 1. Maybe there's a few others that will come along that will be of interest. But with the way the draft has gone and the influence of foreign players and the fact that players stay a very short period of time at one school, we really don't have a great sense of the talent pool that used to come out of college when you were familiar with these, 4-year players. And, when you had a guy, and it totally changed the whole draft process. Like when the Houston Rockets took Ralph Sampson in 1983. Well, Ralph Sampson was the 3-time college player of the year at Virginia. In this day and age, he just stayed 1 year and left. And actually, the way Ralph played at 7'4", he would fit right into today's game. He was a guy born too soon. In an era where you wanted bulky big men down in the paint, that wasn't really Ralph's game, and he got hurt and didn't probably live up to his potential. But was a great, great college player, and that was a big deal when the Houston Rockets got him. They won a coin flip with the Indiana Pacers, who wound up with Steve Stepanovich. And then the following year, Akeem Olajuwon came out, and they did not have a lottery then. And so it was pretty clear that the Rockets were tanking that year with Ralph, because they were in a position to have the Twin Towers, and that's when it meant a lot to have big men in the NBA. And if you look at the way the Rockets played that year, it's a local connection. Elvin Hayes, who was pushing 40. Was playing big minutes for them. They weren't telling the players to lose. It's just how they were using them. Bill Fitch, I believe, was the coach at the time. And so when you had Olajuwon coming out, that was the big deal, even though Michael Jordan was in the same draft. And, Sam Bowie went it's a long and sordid story with the Blazers. But Sam Bowie went number 2 to the Blazers and was never healthy for them, and eventually, had a half-decent career, but did not live up to being the big man that they hoped he would be. And but it was all about Olajuwon. It was all about tanking for Olajuwon, which is why in '85 they had the draft lottery, and everybody thought that was fixed, or a lot of people thought that was fixed because Patrick Ewing wound up with the Knicks. The league wanted the Knicks to have a good team. And there's the frozen envelope story, and then the torn envelope that David Stern put out. Who knows? But that's the way it worked out. And here we are now with the draft where you go, who? What? France? No, never heard of him. And so Tom Lavero's got a column today about how we look at the draft now, especially around here, with the word upside. And he said, upside is the new currency of the NBA. This and the $76 billion in TV rights the league is about to grab, despite nobody watching their showcase event, the NBA Finals. Yeah, it is very strange, but I think that tells you about how sports are viewed on TV, that the networks are willing to pay that kind of money, $76 billion for basketball. But we go back in the archives here with the Wizards and find out how they've done in these upside kind of drafts. And Alex Sarr is that upside kind of guy. I mean, he's 7 feet tall, but he averaged less than 10 points a game playing for his team in New Zealand this past year. He had 4.4 rebounds and 1.3 blocks, only played 17 minutes a game. So there's real hope of upside there. And he says in 2022, they drafted Johnny Davis with the 10th pick. He was from Wisconsin, 10th pick overall. The Athletic reported the Wizards believe in his upside. And since then, he spent most of his time playing in the G League. They believe that, and the boy named Jan, remember that? Jan Vesely had an upside with the 6th pick overall in the first round of the 2011 draft. Turned out the only upside he had was the one he displayed when kissing his girlfriend on camera after being picked. Yeah, remember that? That made headlines at the time. And then last year, Bilal Coulibaly, they took him, and he showed enough in his limited play this season to be curious, but they also traded for Jordan Poole, the former promising guard from Golden State who led the league in embarrassing play. Then again, the result was 15 wins, which was the point of this year, which will again be next year as the franchise looks to be first in the talent assistance line. That may explain the team's decision to trade Denny Advia to Portland for Malcolm Brogdon and the 14th pick in Wednesday's draft, first-round selection in 2029, and 2 second-round picks. They also chose 18-year-old Bub Carrington, who played at Pittsburgh this past season. We'll be aggressive, Will Dawkins, the GM, told reporters. We'll always try to be strategic, and when you have time to prepare, you kind of identify your players and the people you want to get and do your best to get them. Sometimes it works out, takes 2 to tango, but we try to identify the people first, try to identify talent, and if we can get them, we're going to get them. I think you've seen the last 2 years we're willing to move and get who we want to get. And a lot of who they want to get is going to be based on wins. They only had 15 this year, and they could do the limbo and go under it for next year, being assured that they get the number 1 pick. Though you saw what happened with Detroit, as they had only 14 wins, and they wound up with the 5th pick. Atlanta jumped up to number 1 in a draft that is going to be pale in comparison, we think, to what happens next year. So if the ping pong balls fall right, and they rarely have over the years for the Wizards, they've rarely improved their draft position with the ping pong balls. But if they do wind up with the worst record and they do get the number 1 pick, maybe with some of these players that they're bringing in and a Cooper Flagg who could be, a Larry Bird star type, then, maybe, who knows? It's going to be a crapshoot, and the word upside you're going to hear a lot of. Austin Ekeler, he's a veteran, been with the Chargers for the last 7 years, undrafted player, has become a very good running back, kind of a complimentary back. Is not going to get 25 carries a game, but is going to play on third down, catch some passes, and saw this as a great opportunity, partly because Anthony Lynn, who was his head coach with the Chargers, is now the running game coordinator, is what they call him, with the Commanders. And so that's why he said he wound up here. He said what he found out was the Chargers wanted to do a heavy run game, 30 carries. He said that's not his style of game, and he was very intrigued what was happening here. So he signed a free agent contract to come here in March. And anytime you're talking about the Commanders at this time of year, you're talking about quarterback. And you're talking about what they've seen so far from Jaden Daniels. So the obligatory question from Rich Eisen yesterday to Austin Ekeler, hey, what about that quarterback, Jaden Daniels?
He's been looking really good, man. Just making throws. I mean, he's going through it, like learning the plays, right? Making some of the rookie mistakes you'd expect. But it's kind of part of the process of becoming a pro, no matter what position you play. But what you really want to see from your quarterback is what I've seen from my veteran quarterbacks that have done well. You know, you're there extremely early, you're committed, you're talking to the guys about routes, you're talking to them about protections, you're a part of the leadership of the group, but that means having conversations. I remember I ran a route, and right after the route we were done, and he called me over, hey, Eck, like, tell me about, like, why'd you sit? How come you didn't break in on that? And it's like, it seems really small, but those things add up to him becoming a complete player, understanding, you know, the philosophies of his players, why they're doing what they're doing, and he can tell them, hey, well, I think you should be here. And so it's baby steps, but those baby steps add up to you becoming a great player. And then as far as him out there making throws, I mean, he's made some spectacular throws already. And so that's what we expected to see from him, you know, what we saw from college. And then obviously he's very mobile too, which, as we know in this league, is where most of the big plays come from, is out on the run. You know, how can you create when things aren't going right? And those are the teams that are, you know, those are quarterbacks that you see take their teams into those playoff runs. So he's bringing it all.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're willing to share, should we expect him to be a significant part of the running game? Do you think, Austin?
Ooh. I think off schedule, yes, okay. Absolutely. And you know, we'll see. I think we've seen it from Lamar over with the Ravens, right, where you do have some of that option reads. Mm-hmm. Like if you got a quarterback that's dynamic and knows how to protect himself, you know, that's the only thing that we got to get in this guy's head is like, hey, man, like, don't be taking these stinking hits, man. Like, you got 17 games post playoffs that we got to go through. And so I think that's probably going to be a determining factor is Jaden able to protect himself when he runs, like we can see Lamar doing, you know, and some of these other quarterbacks. You know, every quarterback's different. Like you see, you know, Josh Allen, you know, he's trying to truck people, but he's got that type of body type. You know, Jalen's a little more slim, and so it's like, hey, let's protect you, figure out how you can be the most effective just on the field, whether it's running the ball or throwing the ball, and we'll adjust off of that.
Yeah, and so I mean, you, Brian Robinson Jr., Chris Rodriguez also had some good run, literally, figuratively, for Washington towards the end of the season last year. Just to name some of your colleagues in that room, what's the general sense that you have about splitting carries? Like, how's that going to look, do you think, Austin?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's the same thing every single year. You have to go out there and you have to earn your reps. You have to earn your potential. You have to earn your right to be on the field. Mm-hmm. And we do that through OTAs, training camp. And then it's not only in the backfield, because I've been all over the field already. I'm out wide. I'm in the slot. I'm motioning out of the backfield. It's two of us in the backfield. I'm all over the place. And so I've been putting in work. I have a reputation. I have film out there where it shows like, yeah, Austin can have success when you're throwing him the ball, shallows, you know, crossers. I got some double moves in me. And so, hey, where are you earning it at? Because like I said, Coach Lynn's going to put us in the best position for us. And that's one of the great things that I think Coach Lynn does is, hey, what types of runs, what types of positions can I put my running backs in on the field to have success? And a lot of times, there might be two of us out there because that might be the best matchup for the upcoming game. And so we're splitting out. I'm motioning all over the place. So look, you earn it. You put on the field that you're going to be productive with the ball in your hands. Cliff's going to get you on the field. There's no doubt about that.
That's Austin Ekeler. I'm going to bring up a name which you really have to be old to remember, but there was a player here by the name of Nick Giaquinto. And he was part of the Super Bowl team of '82. He may have been here in '83 when they went back and got their butts kicked by the Raiders, and then he left, and it felt like a big void. But it was a guy who could do everything, and that sounds like Ekeler. Maybe Ekeler's better than that, probably better than that, and maybe a guy who can catch a bunch of passes and run the ball. But they're looking at this, you know, two-headed monster of Brian Robinson and Austin Ekeler, and assuming they both stay healthy, that's going to be big because you got a quarterback who can really move. And three guys in the backfield, all of them threats to run. Now, you know, what he's talking about, and this is really going to be big, and we're really going to have to watch this, not necessarily in training camp or the limited time he plays in exhibition games, though there might be something to look at. How well does Jaden Daniels protect himself? Because if you want to look at the downfall of Robert Griffin III, among other things, and what you hear about Daniel's totally different, completely dedicated to the playbook, which Robert wasn't. Robert was all about, how great shape he was, and he was famous for telling the coaching staff, hey, I got it, and then screwing it up. So the mental part is good, but can he protect himself? Because Griffin could not. And that is going to be the biggest key this year. Can he stay upright for 17 games? Can he be the guy that they can count on week after week after week? If that happens, and we still don't know if he's going to be the starting quarterback week one, Marcus Mariota may wind up with the job for a little while, which wouldn't be the worst thing. But if he plays, and if all things come together, and Terry McLaurin has a big year, the offensive line is halfway decent, how good could they be? And the defense has to be picked up as well, because the defense wasn't good last year. It's good a couple of years ago, not good this past year. This is Ekeler with Eisen on just how good the Commanders could be this year.
There's no telling. There's no telling as far as, hey, we're going to win this many games or go this far in the playoffs. Because in my perspective, that's never the goal. The goal is, hey, let's try to become the best team that we possibly can, because a consequence of that will be winning games. And so what that means is, what is our culture? And we got Dan Quinn that has come in and has been talking about brotherhood till he's blue in the face, brotherhood, culture, standard. And not only that, not only talking about it, but showing clips. This is what it looks like. This is BS. We can't have this. And he's calling guys out, and he's saying, this is good, this is bad. And then guess what? That's also resonated with me, because now I'm holding the standard. Now I'm the one saying, hey, you call me out, and I'm going to call you out. And that's what's been happening. And so we're creating this culture of a team where we compete within each other, but we know what the expectation of us is. And when you have that type of energy and you're building that type of team during the offseason, it's the stepping stones to having a great team, which is, again, what creates the wins, which creates. So I can't tell you right now, because we're still in that building phase. We're going to go through training camp here. We're going to continue to obviously get more into football mode. But it's still going to be talking about the culture. I think the Lions have been a great example of that. Over there with the culture that they built. And, there was some publicity on that one, so that one sticks out a little bit more. But it's the same thing that's going on over here with DQ and what he's trying to implement with us and the Commanders. And then it comes down to the players and really the whole building buying into it. And then for us, like I said, like you said, actually, I wasn't here last year.
Right.
And so I don't really give a damn about what the heck happened last year, because it's about now. And like I said, even with fantasy, it's about what'd you do for me lately? Well, guess what? It's a new chance for us to do something for you here in the short term.
So is he showing film from last year, or you're just talking about practices?
Just right now.
Okay.
Last year's long gone.
But he's gone.
Talk about the guys we have in the building right now.
That's Austin Ekeler, one of the guys in the building right now trying to turn around the culture. We've heard that word. God, we heard that word a lot. And it didn't quite work out in the Rivera era, did it? And maybe it will with Dan Quinn. We'll have to see. But training camp, we're getting closer and closer. Rookies are due in July 18th, and then the veterans get started on the 24th, and the season will be here before you know it. It's and the way the NFL works is there are always talk show slots available for people who want to talk NFL. Even though this is supposed to be the little off season, it's like the iceberg that continues to shrink. We used to wrap up the season with the Super Bowl in mid-January, and then we'd segue into the NBA and college basketball and hockey and whatever, and then there'd be this thing that would pop up maybe in May or maybe early June of a mini camp. That was it. I never heard anything about off-season workouts. Never heard of that. So you have the mini camp, and then everybody breaks until training camp. Now, when they had a 14-game schedule, this is the crazy part about it. When there was 14 games, training camp used to start earlier, and they would start the season later. Now it's the second week of September. It used to be the first, and then they realized they were getting hurt in TV ratings because of Labor Day weekend, so they moved that up. But it would not start until mid-September. It wasn't unusual to start the season 15th, 16th of September. And training camp would open right after the 4th of July. These guys would be there for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and they would play 6 exhibition games. Six. And so the calendar is completely different now. They don't even have two-a-days anymore. And the way we approach the off season, it's like, oh, well, finally everybody's taken off and it's going to be for 6. It's really not for 6 weeks. So the yak continues. Talk shows speculation, all that stuff. And Ekeler seems to be a willing participant for anybody that calls. Matt Hassleback used to be, I thought he was a pretty good analyst with ESPN. He was shaved in the cutbacks and now is working with quarterbacks. He does a lot of work with that. He lives in the Boston area. He was on yesterday with the Dan Patrick Show and brought up some really interesting points that I think pertain to Jayden Daniels and the idea of a rookie quarterback going in and playing right away. Even the great ones struggle. Peyton Manning famously with the 28 interceptions in his rookie year. Some flame out because of it, and some, like Jordan Love now, being discussed as one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL who sat for 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers. The pros and the cons of that, as discussed by Matt Hassleback as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got Mike Callow sitting in for Tony at 11 o'clock today. So interesting career for Matt Hassleback. He did not have a great senior year on a not very good team at Boston College and started off as a backup to a Hall of Famer in Green Bay, backed up Brett Favre. And Green Bay was doing this for a number of years with Favre. Mark Brunell came out of this system where they would, take quarterbacks mid-round, late round, sometimes free agents, and develop them with Andy Reid as the quarterback's coach and under Favre. And there was Doug Peterson was around as a veteran backup. And they would take a look at these quarterbacks, and when they were ready to be starters, they would trade them for higher draft picks. It was a really good way to do business. Brett Favre wasn't going anywhere. Would he start there for 20 years before Aaron Rodgers took over? It's an amazing run. So it really worked out well for him. And then he has this really good career, not a Hall of Fame career, but Hassleback has a really good career in Seattle, takes the Seahawks to the Super Bowl where they lost to the Steelers. And then he wraps up his career as a backup to Peyton Manning. So he's a backup bookend with Hall of Famers on each side. Really, really cool. And he's got a great perspective on quarterbacking in the league, does a lot of coaching with that in the Boston area. And he was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show with Ryan Leaf as the guest host. And they got into the discussion of, and then we're going to hear a lot of it in the next few years with Jayden Daniels. How do you know? How do you know whether you got that guy? I mean, until this past year, the jury was out on Jordan Love, but they had the luxury of playing him behind Aaron Rodgers for 3 years. Not quite the case. Maybe Marcus Mariota can be the starter here for 4 or 5 games until they're ready to put Daniels in. It's a little bit different situation. So this is Hassleback on the litmus test. How do you know if you got that guy?
I hear people talk about how do you know, and I don't even think head coaches know this. I listen to head coaches in press conferences, and I sit there and I'm like, that's the dumbest answer I've ever heard in my life. Sounds like you're saying what you think your general manager wants to hear, or what your owner of the team wants to hear, or what the fans want to hear, or these beat writers want to hear. It's really stupid sounding, sometimes when some of the stuff that these coaches say. Truth of the matter is the quarterback has to know what to do, how to protect himself and the guys around him on third down. That third down blitz pickup is the whole name of the game is the quarterback. You make your money in the NFL as a quarterback on third down. What happens from the 20 to the 20 is pretty benign on first and second down, but third down and then obviously red zone, that's where it happens. But for a young quarterback, the hardest thing to kind of master or have command of is blitz protection, knowing where your hots are, side adjustments, audibles, all that kind of stuff. Because if you don't know that, you're going to get hurt and your season will be cut short, or your teammates are going to get hurt. You're going to get someone hurt. And obviously, you can be so remedial and so not ready that can happen on first and second down. We've seen that happen too. But no, that's how you. I think that's how you define it. And for me, it took a long time. And part of the reason it took a long time is I got no snaps. I'm sitting there watching instead of, doing. But I think for a lot of guys that have had success, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, I put myself in this category because it took me a long time. The ability to sit and watch from a great quarterback, and more is caught than taught. Just to sit in there and watch a Drew Bledsoe, watch a Brett Favre, watch a, whoever the guy is, be a pro. That is so valuable, and a lot of guys don't get that. A lot of guys don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, it would have been there was an opportunity for Warren Moon to come in and be that mentor. I know when Jim Harbaugh showed up in year 2, like things completely took off for me in terms of how I went about my business as a professional. I just didn't have any guidance or understanding. And I know sometimes with Brett Favre, he was out on his own tangent doing his own thing, but it was greatness you were getting to watch and witness and help.
But even that, right? Like Andy Reid was the quarterback coach in Green Bay, and he comes in the first meeting I ever had with him, he was like, hey, study the intangibles of Brett Favre. And I'm like, I don't even know what intangibles are. Like, what's an intangible? Like at the time, I'm like, what? And he's like, watch the way, like he basically was like, his decision-making, his fundamentals, like all this stuff is terrible. He gets away with stuff that like no one else is going to get away with. But here's where he's so special. He's an incredible leader. Like he has the ability to bring energy to any situation that he's in. He has the ability to motivate his teammates, like they don't even know that he's doing it. He has the ability to intimidate the opponent without even saying a word. And there's other little things. Like he knows the name of every single person in this building, from the person that like cleans the floors to the person that signs the checks. Like he knew everybody's name. And those things are things that absolutely matter if you're the franchise quarterback. Some guys are like, yeah, come on, serve me, man. I'm the franchise QB. Like, man, no, that's not it. And you see a lot of guys come in like, oh, I was a first-round pick. I was spoiled at my SEC school. I was whatever. And like that is not it. The best quarterbacks are the guys that are like, hey, what can I do for you? What can I do to make other people better? And then I think you see that. I think you see that in the Tom Brady's and the Peyton Mannings and the Brett Favre's, like a lot of guys like that. But to see it modeled every single day, and that's what Andy Reid told me to like, hey, have your antenna up for that. Study that. Don't study like how he throws the ball late down the middle. Don't study how he throws the ball like from his knees after he trips on a running back. Like that's not it. That's not what makes you great. And it's not always the things that get on whatever SportsCenter top 10. It's those boring plays that kind of keep the team out of 2nd and 11 and give the play caller 2nd and 4 instead. And, I studied that for 3 years. I studied that stuff.
That's Matt Hassleback, part 1 of his conversation with Ryan Leaf yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. Get to part 2. And I guess you could address this with Jaden Daniels as well, but he's talking, specifically about the number 1 quarterback, which was Caleb Williams, taken by the Bears. And having played with Peyton Manning, having played with Brett Favre, having observed other great quarterbacks around the league, he says there's one thing that you really look for in these guys. And he uses a golf analogy to make that explanation.
You have to make your putts the first time when the opportunity is there to make it. You get one opportunity. That's it. And a lot of quarterbacks that I've been around, they could have made that throw. Oh, let me try again. I can make that throw. Yeah, I know you can make that throw. There's like thousands of people out there that could make that throw. But there's like 15 that can make it at the moment that it needs to be made when that opportunity comes. And those are the guys that never look back. Those are the guys whose teams go on an ascension, that other free agents around the league say, hey, man, I want to team up with that guy. And I think that's like one of the things. I ended my career in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck. He was one of those guys. There's a lot of guys that could make that throw. He made it when it needed to be made, whether it was a playoff game, we're the worst team in football. No one's expecting us to have a good year. Rookie quarterback, boom, upset on the road. There's certain players, certain quarterbacks, certain golfers who do that. Like he nailed that eagle putt and had the other guy 2-putted. That's the difference. That's the rare air that we're talking about. So that's just the danger, I guess, right? That the Bears are saying, hey, we're going to sink or swim. We're going to, as a GM or a head coach or whoever, we're going to get a next contract based on this one guy. Yeah. And there's other philosophies out there that I think the risk management is less, but it's certainly very exciting. If you're a Bears fan, like you finally feel like, hey, we might have something special here. And honestly, I hope they do. I hope they do. It'd be fun. It's always fun when the Bears are good.
Keyword might. And the difference between Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels as to the way they're being handled is Caleb Williams was named the starting quarterback on the first day of rookie camp, We have finished up minicamp and heading towards training camp, and Dan Quinn has not yet named Jaden Daniels the starting quarterback, as much praise as he has gotten. And I think a lot of it had to do with ego. I think with Caleb Williams, they felt like, oh, we better do this. Now, they'll say, well, he's the number one pick of the draft, and he's going to be the leader of the team, and we have to put our faith in him right away and show the rest of the team. Maybe so. But, I saw this happen with Robert Griffin III, where he was named the starter on the first day of rookie minicamp. And to be fair, he had a spectacular rookie year. He really did. But the sense of entitlement ultimately came back to bite him when he began to struggle. And we'll see what happens with Caleb Williams. And a big difference, too, going to the NFL and playing first at Oklahoma and then playing at USC the last couple of years. Yeah, he had a terrible defense at USC. But the big difference in the pros, this is what you always hear, is the speed of the secondary. In college, you may face every once in a while an NFL-level cornerback. Every week in the NFL, you're facing those guys. The closing speed, it's totally different. And if you can get used to that, great. If not, we'll have to see. Last thing from Hassleback, and this is what he says was the perfect situation for him coming into the league. And what every quarterback he feels should be able to do once they come into the NFL.
I feel so fortunate. I come into that quarterback room. Mike Holmgren's the head coach. Andy Reid's the quarterback coach. Brett Favre's the starting quarterback. The backup quarterbacks are Doug Peterson and Rick Meyer and me. Like, they paid me $62,500 to be on the practice squad that first year. And I'm sitting there like, these people are idiots. I should be paying them to be in this room. I get to be in this room. It was like Harvard Business School for quarterbacking. Like, it was amazing. Did I play? No. I sat there and practiced holding for field goals for Ryan Longwell because Sean Landetta didn't want to do it. Like, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. And a lot of guys don't get that. They get chewed up and they get spit out, and then people say like, "Ah, man, that guy can't play." It's like, yeah, it was a tough situation though, dude. That was not ideal.
Yeah, the other problem though is, he was not a high draft pick. He might have been. I don't even know if he was drafted, but he was low, so he was willing. You take a guy in the first round, the expectation is going to play right away. And even if he, has to sit out a few games behind somebody else, there's an issue. In his case, yeah, I mean, that probably, if you looked at the perfect scenario, that's it. You wind up with a team where you can sit for a while, learn, and then when you finally get your opportunity. I think, one of the examples we had here was Mark Rippon. Mark Rippon came to this team in 1986, so it was post-Joe Theismann. But at that time, they had, who was it? Jay Schrader. Jay Schrader was the starting quarterback, and that first year, they also brought in Doug Williams to be the backup. The USFL had folded. He had experience with Joe Gibbs. They'd worked together in Tampa, where Gibbs actually, pressed the front office to draft him in the first round, which they did, and had a great career there, but they were really cheap, and he decided he got to get out of there, sat out a year, played in the USFL. USFL folds. Gibbs offers him a job as a backup. So you got a really good quarterback, a first-rounder in Doug Williams, and Jay Schrader, who was an interesting case, tried baseball first. He wound up in the third round with Washington, had a rocket of an arm, and they played those couple of years. If you watch the Super Bowl highlights from 1988, the one where Doug Williams had that spectacular second quarter and cemented his legacy and became the first African-American quarterback to start a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, you will see Mark Rippon in a Redskins sweater on the sideline because he was inactive for 2 years. He didn't play at all in 1986 and 1987. In those days, you were able to stash guys on injured reserve with a phony baloney injury. So they came up with something. One year, I think it was like a rare blood disease or something, some nonsense. And he didn't play, but he was learning. He was learning and learning and learning. So by the time things churned and they got rid of Jay Schrader early in the 1988 season, so it was after the Super Bowl, he got his opportunity as a backup to Doug Williams, got to play. They had Stan Humphries at the time. And by the time he became the full-time starter in 1989, he'd been in the system for 3 years and got to learn behind some really great quarterbacks, one of them who won a Super Bowl. And I don't think Mark Rippon plays in the league if he doesn't have that chance. Because if you look at the rest of his career, once he left Washington and playing behind that incredible offensive line where he was sacked only 7 times in that season and won the Super Bowl MVP, he didn't come close to that. He was just a journeyman type of guy. But he was smart, he was big, and at that time the rocket arm was valued, and he threw a really good deep ball and really knew the ins and outs of the system. He really studied hard. And so that and had the opportunity to just learn and not play. Because I remember when he was playing in exhibition games as a rookie, totally overmatched. He would drop back to pass and get instantly sacked. And I didn't think he was going to play in the league. Winds up as a Super Bowl MVP. So a lot of it is circumstance. Worked out really well for Matt Hassleback, and he had a terrific career, probably with the great help of what he just described there, being able to learn in the Green Bay system. They don't have the luxury of that here, but I would not be disappointed at all if Jaden Daniels sits behind Marcus Mariota for a while, maybe even the first half of the season. I know it'll raise red flags. Oh, my God, bust. But that could be in play. That could possibly be in play. Don't forget, tomorrow, as Carolina is playing the Washington Spirit at Audi Field, Bram Weinstein, who has been doing the games on ESPN630DC.com, he's going to be doing that. So that's going to be on ESPN630DC.com, 7:30 tomorrow night as the Washington Spirit takes on Carolina. Enjoy this weekend. Some of us need it a little more than others. We will be back here on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Mike Callow is in for Tony coming up next.